Hello, and welcome to another episode of The End of the Search. This one I call it Nourishing the Self. I chose that topic, or that topic was chosen, because nourishing the self usually may be associated with an activity. And actually, this is not an activity at all. You are the self. That is just the way it is. That's just what it is. Nourishing the self, however, is the consequence of not believing the content of the mind. It's not that I sit down and try to nourish the self, because that still holds on to an identity, a seeming individual that now is nourishing the self. But you are being the self always. That never stopped being. So when we don't identify with the content of the mind, then the nourishment is already taking place. Now, in the world of appearances, the practicality of this would be when there's a thought, anything that usually kind of shake your foundation because, of course, you're believing in it. That's the reason why. When a thought appears, at that moment, when you look at the thought and realize it is just a thought, just by that realization, you are nourishing the self. You see? So all we're doing is, in each moment, noticing how the mind can be identified with any thoughts that is trying to interpret the present moment experience so they can be seen. Not judged, but seen. And that's how we experience what is referred to as the peace that surpasses all understanding, also known as a happy life. This is why this is not complicated at all. Truth is very simple, because truth is. But the conceptual mind turns it into something very complicated and begin to come up with all sorts of, you could say, activities in order to get to truth, in order to reach it, in order to become. But what there is to become if you already are. Right now, in spite of whatever may be taking place in your present experience, if you don't believe the evaluation that the mind, the thoughts are making of any of your experiences or your present experience, if you don't believe that, you are experiencing, not you personally, but I don't know what words to use, the self. And that self, by not believing the mind's interpretation of whatever may be happening, is the equivalent of nourishing it. If you take a plant, you nourish it by giving it water. Well, you're always nourishing the self when you're not believing the content of the mind. And that doesn't mean that the content of the mind or the thoughts cannot be used for practical reasons. Yeah, but I always say that the mind is used to execute rather to be an advisor. It's a subtle difference there. When a thought, an idea may come up, well, the mind is used, the conceptual mind is used to function in the world of appearances, but not as my advisor. So when we rest in being, because it's what's happening anyway, this is the point. This is interesting because I know the words are so tricky, because I say about resting in being as if it's something you do, but we cannot do much with them except point. So right now, if you don't identify with the thoughts, if you don't believe any thoughts, what remains? Don't answer. If you answer, you went back to the mind. I am pointing to the fact that you are. That is nourishing the self. You are, you've always been. And the tendency is to believe I'm a separate entity, and therefore I need these problems that needs to be solved. And once again, this is interesting because resting in the self, the problems either, well, the issues or whatever the case may be, either takes care of themselves, or you find yourself being inspired to take a particular sort of action, if necessary, to deal with them. But at all times, because you're nourishing the self by not believing the drama or the story that the mind is trying to conjure up about anything that may be happening, you peacefully can address the situation. And peacefully means that whatever needs to happen in order to address the situation will take place. So sometimes they may take a lot of action. Sometimes it may take an attitude to be firm. So I'm not saying that you're like a doormat sitting in meditation or, in Om, and very peacefully you'll deal with whatever happens. No, I'm saying that whatever is required at that particular moment will be very naturally, it will come from a different space. You see? It's not coming from that place of, or from that energy that is reacting. It comes from a space that is more like responding. But all happens very organically. We don't have to be concerned about the details of the movie or whatever presents itself. All we're pointing here is that if in each moment, from the beginning, from the moment I wake up in the morning, or this character wakes up in the morning, from that moment, there's a recognition that I know nothing. And I am open to what is. If you watch last video, previous to this one, of course, you have to go by the numbers. You notice that I was addressing that a peaceful life, a happy life, it takes only trust and letting go of all expectations. Living in that space, you see how life moves you. Now, I like to add something that maybe I could have said it on that video, but I'll say it in this one. When I talk about trust, and I also talk about letting go of all attachments, or should I say expectations, I would say that what I'm pointing to is that if you want to hang on to something, I'm using the word hanging on, but I don't know what words to use, is to nourishing the self. You see? So when you're nourishing the self, it could be said that you're doing something. But once again, the doing is actually the not believing the content of the mind, which is actually be doing nothing, but in that sense, it appears to be as a doing. Nourishing the self is the most important thing, because when that is taken care of, when you're nourishing the fact that you are, when you're not identified with the content of the mind, well, obviously you're not identified with the thoughts that may suggest possibilities. Consequently, you are living in a space of trust. You are in a trusting space. Only the content of the mind, it tells you that you are who you think you are. By not believing the content of the mind, then you simply are. And this is where these videos are pointing to always. So right now, from this moment on, again, there's no moment on, it's just right now. Not believing the content of the mind. Let it be, the thoughts will be there, that's fine. And of course, since we're so used to practicing of believing the content of the mind, it appears as if though we need to practice not to believe the content of the mind. That's fine. I'm aware of the time-space appearances. But the bottom line is that the message is not going to change. It's going to be the same always. By not believing the content of the mind, what remains? What remains is what is. What is the self. Consequently, is being nourished. And well, this is inspiration that came through. I hope it served. And as always, may peace permeate the mind so that love can be extended.